Hi there. It's good to be with you, my friends. I'm here to talk with you about any questions that you have, but I'd like to share with you a brand new study that just came out. It was just reported last week, and it was about the role that the hypothalamus has in diabetes. Now, this is what I've been seeing in my clinical practice for 25 years is that if you support the hypothalamus with all the lifestyle behaviors we talk about with Genesis Gold, Sacred 7, that if you have type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, you're going to be able to stabilize your blood sugars, reverse that insulin resistance, lose weight, especially body fat around your middle, much faster. And now we have proof of why. So this study was done on mice, and what they found is that there were certain neurons in the hypothalamus called agouti neurons that actually are affected by insulin and glucose. And when those neurons are changed in any way, chemically, toxic change, nutraceutically changed, it affects your blood sugar. So it was very, very exciting information. It's something, like I said, I've seen for so long. But it just tells me a lot more about why we really need to get to the root of these clinical issues. That just putting someone on a diet, getting them to exercise, giving them drugs that work at the pancreatic level is not going to be enough to actually fix the problem unless you get to the root of the problem. And if the root of the problem is hypothalamic dysfunction, the hypothalamus has become insulin resistant, it's become less sensitive to glucose, then you're going to always have to be taking medication, always have to follow some kind of diet, always be excessively exercising to control your blood sugars. Why is that important? Diabetes is a huge issue in the developed world. In this country, the percentage of people with type 2 diabetes, and I'm not talking about type 1. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease usually instigated by a viral infection, usually in childhood, but it can be later. And you become insulin dependent because your beta cells in your pancreas can no longer produce insulin. They've been destroyed. But type 2 diabetes is different. Type 2 diabetes is you develop insulin resistance. We thought it was just peripherally, meaning in your body, your fat cells, your muscles, your heart become resistant to insulin. Now, what does that mean? Your blood sugar doesn't actually jump into the cells. It has to be escorted by insulin. Insulin acts like a lock and key mechanism. So the insulin receptor is the lock and insulin is the key. It opens up the doorway, not just for glucose to go in through its own channel, but for water to go into the cells, for amino acids to go into the cells, and also for fatty acids to move in and out of the cells. Now, this is really important because when you develop insulin resistance and you're no longer able to get the glucose into the cells because those cell receptor sites are not letting insulin into the cells. So now none of those gateways are opening. It's not just sugar that's the problem. It's not just glucose, which is used for energy, that can't get into the cells. You can't get amino acids in that allow your body to make more chemicals, more enzymes, more hormones to actually make structure for the cells. Fatty acids can't get in and out to make cell membranes and also steroid hormones. Water can't get in and out, so there's a dehydration of the cell. It is critical that insulin resistance is addressed. And we used to believe up until this study that it was only in our periphery, in our fat cells, in our muscles, our heart that had the insulin resistance. But we know now that it's the hypothalamus that also becomes insulin resistant and not as sensitive to glucose levels. And that then is what affects peripheral insulin resistance. And eventually the pancreas trying to put out more and more and more insulin to try to overwhelm those receptor sites gets pooped out. And now you might need insulin to actually control your blood sugars. So what is the best way to really monitor your blood sugar levels? You can do blood tests and do like fasting blood sugar or postprandial, which means after you've eaten blood sugars. But your hemoglobin A1C is really the most accurate, mainly because it's showing about a 6 to 8 week period of time of what your blood sugars have been doing. And if your blood sugars have been high, hemoglobin A1C is high. It's a protein that's on the red blood cell, the hemoglobin on the red blood cell, that is actually marked for glucose. So how high your blood glucose is how high that hemoglobin A1C is. So you want to keep your hemoglobin A1C under 5.7. If it's higher than that, then you're moving into insulin resistance, meaning your insulin cannot get into your cells to allow glucose, unlock those doorways to allow glucose to actually get into your cells. Okay. And if that happens, then your pancreas is going to work harder. You're going to feel like you have less energy. You're going to start to store all that extra sugar. It's still floating around in the bloodstream because it couldn't get into the cells. The liver then converts it into triglycerides, triple sugars. And then what happens is those triglycerides get stored in your fat cells, usually right around your middle. We call this belly fat that people have the insulin meter. You know, how thick that is how long you've been insulin resistant. So it's really is key that we reverse insulin resistance in the periphery, but more so in the hypothalamus. A little bit of water here. So what I'd like you to understand is that when you support your hypothalamus nutraceutically with Genesis Gold, what you're going to be doing is you're going to help the hypothalamus optimize its function. And the first thing it needs to do is reverse its own insulin resistance. And it will do that with the sacred 7 amino acids that are in the Genesis Gold, with all of the different botanicals in the Genesis Gold. It actually helps to reverse that insulin resistance in the hypothalamus. When that starts to reverse, the pancreas functions better. We actually know that there's a hormone that the hypothalamus makes called pro-opiomelanocortin that controls glucose metabolism by the pancreas as well as by the liver, and also at the fat cell level. So if your glucose metabolism is not functioning properly, you will develop insulin resistance. You'll have high blood sugar. You'll eventually store it as body fat. You'll become obese. You can develop metabolic disorders, which basically is not just the insulin resistance that's leading to diabetes, but hypertension, high blood pressure, diseases of the heart, strokes, heart attack, arteriosclerosis. The weight that we see with insulin resistance is just what we can see at the cellular level. The diseases are pretty profound. We see a lot of inflammatory markers. So a lot of the inflammation that goes along with insulin resistance is actually triggering the inflammation in the arteries and causing an increased risk of plaque, arteriosclerosis, heart attack, and stroke. So it's really important that insulin resistance is reversed, and we're seeing it younger and younger. We're seeing it as early as childhood. So we see obesity that's insulin resistant related. These kids look like they're heading towards type 2 diabetes in childhood. What's happening there? I mean, why would children be developing this? Well, it's dietary. They're eating a lot of ultra processed foods, a lot more carbohydrates, not enough protein, not enough healthy fats, definitely not enough plants, not enough vegetables and fruits, and that is contributing to their insulin resistance. They're not getting as much exercise as children did, say 20, 30, 40 years ago. I don't know about you, but I'm in my mid 60s, and I remember spending the majority of my childhood outside. If the weather was good, we were outside, running around, playing, jumping rope, climbing trees, riding our bikes, skating, roller skates. We were very physically active, and children today are not as physically active. I mean, even taking them to practice, for an hour a day isn't the same kind of physical activity as allowing them to play, free play, where they're climbing and jumping and running and chasing each other. That just uses all of their body. They're a lot healthier mentally and physically, and we're just not seeing this with these children. They're not getting enough free play. So encouraging the kids to play, feeding them plant-based diets, making sure they're getting healthy protein and enough healthy fats, and they're not filling up on starchy, sugary foods. And that goes for adults too. If you are eating this way, you are actually leading yourself down the road towards insulin resistance and eventually that type 2 diabetes, where you can no longer make enough insulin and you may end up becoming insulin dependent eventually. We'll see that. One of the things that we know about the hypothalamus even more so is because of the obesity drugs, the anti-obesity drugs, the Wegovy, the Ozempic, which is the anti-diabetic drug. And because it targets the GLP-1 receptors in the hypothalamus, it helps to control blood sugar, appetite, and metabolism. We know the hypothalamus is really key. It's really the core organ that controls metabolism, that controls your blood glucose, and that controls how much body fat you lay down. Your hypothalamus is communicating directly to your fat cells, and your fat cells communicating to the hypothalamus. So your hypothalamus knows how much fat you're storing. And if you're storing enough fat, which we used to do automatically when we had to survive the winter and we didn't have enough plant foods to gather, we have a natural ability to store fat. That's not a bad thing. If we're able to live off that fat during a winter where we can't get enough food. But, in developed countries, winter really never comes in the sense that we become food deprived. So we really need to pay attention to keeping our body fat down, our lean body mass up by exercising, eating an adequate amount of protein, and making sure that we're supporting our hypothalamus so it can function optimally from childhood all the way until our senior years, so that we don't develop insulin resistance and metabolic conditions. The metabolic diseases will be, and are right now, but even will be worse in the next 20 years. The reason the majority of people are dying, it will not be cancer. It'll be metabolic diseases. And it's because of our diets and our lack of activity, and probably so much as well as stress. When you're under a lot of stress. Now, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat and I will answer them directly. And we can veer off the diabetes and obesity conversation. Whatever you want me to answer, I'll try to do my best to do so. So just put your questions in the chat and I'll get to them. I was talking about the prevalence of metabolic diseases, and part of it is diet, lack of activity, but also stress. So when you're under an incredible amount of stress, and stress, is we all can be under the same type of stress and react to it differently. So how you react to the stress will make a big difference in terms of how your body responds to that stress, and whether you're going into a hypercortisol mode and you're having to lay down more and more body fat because you've have produced so much cortisol over a long period of time, versus being able to be a little bit calmer about your stress. I do have a calm meditation that I offer in my hormone reboot training that will really help you to learn how to make more GABA to kind of calm down your nervous system so that you're not feeling so much stress, and that will help with the cortisol levels as well. The other thing that I have in the hormone reboot training that's really, really helpful is my insulin resistant diet. It's been great to actually help people not just lose weight, but to reverse insulin resistance and control their blood sugars. It can be a little harsh in the beginning because you've really cut out all those sugars and starches in the beginning, but you slowly add them back according to what your blood sugars are doing and how much weight you're able to lose. You slowly start adding them back. And I haven't had any patients who haven't been successful with it if they follow it and support their hypothalamus at the same time. And of course, they're exercising. So we have a question here. Holly asks, should we support the hypothalamus? Do we need both Genesis Gold and Sacred 7, or can you use one at a time? So it really matters what your situation is. If you're, fairly healthy, Genesis Gold will be enough. If you have issues in your gut where you have intestinal dysbiosis, you may have an overgrowth of fungus in your gut, you have a bacterial issue, you may want to start with Sacred 7 and treat the gut before you can move on to Genesis Gold. The phytonutrients in Genesis Gold will kind of feed that imbalanced gut bacteria and fungus until that's healed up. Sometimes that's what I find for my patients. They'll start taking Genesis Gold and they start getting a little gassy. I'm like, okay, you probably have a little candida overgrowth. We got to deal with that first. So I have them both. And then people who are really out of balance, they've been out of balance for years. They have a traumatic brain injury. They're going through menopause and are super symptomatic with hot flashes and night sweats. They have severe insomnia. They're on antidepressants or anti-anxieties, or they have dementia or learning disabilities like ADHD. I will actually have them take both Sacred 7 and Genesis Gold together. The extra Sacred 7 will really help their hypothalamus heal a lot faster. It's really important that you give your hypothalamus time to heal. Genesis Gold and Sacred 7 are not like a, a one dose cure. They're just not. It takes time for for you to get out of balance. It doesn't happen overnight unless you're born with, a congenital abnormality of your hypothalamus, which is very, very rare. Babies won't survive with that. Um, Usually your hypothalamus is damaged over time. Poor nutrition, toxicity, traumatic brain injury, major stress. Something happened to damage it over time. So it takes about 90 days to start to optimize the hypothalamus. And the reason it takes that long, there's a 90-day window of communication kind of balancing itself out between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the lower endocrine glands. So it takes that long to see those changes. You'll start feeling better pretty quickly. Within 2, 3 weeks, you'll start noticing changes. But to really heal that miscommunication, you want to take it for at least 90 days. Then, if you've been out of balance for, let's say, 10 years, we're going to add 10 months to that 90 days. So we're into the 13 months to really optimize hypothalamic function. 1 month per year you've been out of balance to really give the hypothalamus a chance to heal as deeply as possible. Its job is to really, really keep you in balance to survive whatever your life is dealing you. So you do want to make sure you give it time. So Holly says that she needs Sacred 7 because she ended up in the restroom a lot. Yes, so start with Sacred 7. And then you might want to get a stool analysis, like Genova Labs offers a GI profile you can get done, and you can go on their site and order it yourself. And what it'll do is give you information if you have an imbalance in your gut bacteria. So not just the beneficial bacteria and whether or not you have infections, it will actually run, if you do have pathogens, it'll run those pathogens against typical antimicrobials that are prescription, but also botanical antimicrobials. So you can treat it yourself or take it to your provider. It will also look at all the commensal organisms in your gut to make sure those are in balance and give you information about digestion, et cetera. So if you have any questions about that, just, throw that into the chat. I go over the gut in detail in my Hormones in Harmony book about, basically how it functions and why Genesis Gold may make you feel like you have a little bit of a reaction because it's telling you something's going on in your gut. Now, your hypothalamus is talking to your gut, and your gut's talking to your hypothalamus too. So sometimes that early balancing will be an increase in bowel movement. You're pooping more because you're detoxifying more. That's really, really common in the first couple of weeks, is to detoxify. Okay, so it doesn't look like Holly asked the last question. So she just hasn't finished the book yet. You're very welcome, Holly. So it's very interesting how this communication happens at the biochemical level, and how actually I think fairly easily we can manipulate that communication and enhance it through nutraceuticals. And Genesis Gold is a great one for that. Now, if my patients who have severe insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, I usually will recommend that they also take, on top of the Genesis Gold, that they'll take a little extra berberine with their meals, like 500 milligrams, 2 to 3 meals a day. Berberine kind of acts like metformin does. It helps at the peripheral level open up those insulin receptors, so it helps with that insulin resistance. It also can help balance out your gut bacteria too. So I use berberine a lot for a lot of different reasons. It's kind of a hot herb, so you do want to take it with food. And I found taking it when I went through experiments with, my own patients and in my hormone healing circle, that I noticed taking it, I didn't have sugar cravings after lunch. So I find if I don't eat enough carbohydrates for breakfast, which I usually don't, I crave carbs or sugar after lunch because I usually eat a pretty healthy lunch, but then I'm like craving some sugar. The berberine helped with that. So part of its mechanism is to help you to release some of your stored sugar faster. And that tells the hypothalamus, okay, everything's okay. It's going to take a while to digest that food. You don't have that stored sugar from the food in your system yet. You need to get it out of storage. You need to get it out of your glycogen storage. And berberine can help with that, especially if your body's not used to going into that to that storage. So it's great for my patients who are especially if they're needing to lose weight and they're insulin resistant, to start taking berberine at least a couple times a day, but go slowly. Can cause a little bit of stomach upset. I don't recommend starting it with dinner. I recommend starting it with lunch as your biggest meal. And then if you're doing fine, you don't have any gastric upset, then you can add it to the next biggest meal, which may be dinner. Hopefully it's breakfast, but usually not. And that should really, really help to reverse that insulin resistance. So the very interesting aspect of the hypothalamic connection to diabetes are these neurons. So your hypothalamus is made of 9 different neurons. And those neurons produce neurochemicals like neurotransmitters, but they also produce hormones. So it's a neuroendocrine gland. So it produces the same chemicals as your nervous system does, but it also produces hormones like your endocrine system does. And because of that, there's this intimate communication between hormones, the immune system, the nervous system, and that's all going through the operation management of the hypothalamus, which is why I think it's so important to support your hypothalamus. I was just talking to Gabby. Gabby's online with us now in the YouTube chat. If you have any questions, she posts them right up here for me. But I was talking to Gabby about the fact that I saw my own primary care provider. I have a pinched nerve in my neck, which I've had for a long time. In 2014, I did an MRI. There's a little bit of disc loss. If I do a little traction, it really helps. So he just wanted to make sure I didn't have neuropathy. So he went ahead and ordered all of this blood work, including a bunch of B vitamins and all kinds of stuff. And great thing is it was all negative. But the great thing was as well, I don't take any extra vitamins. All I take is Genesis Gold and eat a healthy diet. And all of my metabolites and my vitamins, minerals, everything was right in order. So eating well and supporting your hypothalamus can actually, probably don't need extra support like a multivitamin and mineral. Got another question in here. Oh, so Kimberly was asking about intermittent fasting. She lost a lot of weight 3 years ago, but she's finding that in menopause, she's having a harder time sustaining it. Again, supporting your hypothalamus during menopause can make a big difference in raising your metabolism. So however you lost the weight, and I have patients come to me all the time where they've been on pretty strict diet, keto diets, they've been on whole food diets, they've done intermittent fasting, and it is very successful in the beginning because it's a change of your dietary pattern. All of a sudden you're eating differently, you're eating different nutrients, you're taking a different amount of calories, you're becoming more aware, you start to rev up your metabolism, but your hypothalamus will get used to that. And if you haven't corrected the hypothalamic dysfunction to start with, you're going to go back to whatever your weight was to begin with, or maybe just a little bit lower than that. So supporting your hypothalamus during weight loss helps to reset your weight set point at a healthy lower weight. So not plummeting down, but stepping it down, like stepping down stairs. You want a slow step down with that weight set point, so your hypothalamus doesn't panic because you've lost too much weight too fast, and bring your weight right back up to what it was before when you start eating the same amount of calories that you were eating before. So Kimberly's asking about, she ordered the products and she's excited to get started and want to know if keto is the way to stay on. Keto is great. If you are overweight and most of your weight's around your middle, you might want to look at my insulin resistant diet. It's not as drastic as the keto diet, and it's pretty easy to step up, and I've had a lot of success with it. It's very similar to the keto diet, but there's a lot more variety that you're allowed, and it'll just help you kind of determine, eat more normally and slowly add back the carbs when you reach each one of those platforms. So I divide it into 3 different phases. The first phase is the most drastic. You're getting no starches, no sugars. You're losing weight. Okay. As you've been pretty continually losing weight pretty successfully, and most people will lose about 2 pounds of weight a week. We want to go for fat loss, not lean body mass loss. You have got to eat enough protein. The newest studies show that you need at least 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That is a lot of protein, way more than the RDA. So you have to make sure you're getting enough protein so you don't lose lean body mass. So as you're eating, enough protein and I like to calculate it by my actual pounds of lean body mass. So I calculate between a half a gram and a gram, according to how active you are, of lean body mass. I use the online Navy calculator to figure out body fat and lean body mass. It uses a neck circumference, a waist circumference, a hip circumference. You get your age, your height, your weight, and it's pretty accurate. If you're an athlete, it will not be as accurate as you want it to be. But if you're an average person, it's pretty accurate in terms of body fat and lean body mass. And using lean body mass, what we want is more pounds of lean body mass. Okay. We don't want low lean body mass. And taking at least a half to 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass, you'll be able to maintain that lean body mass and even make a little bit more while you're losing body fat, which means you may not see as much pounds lost, but you're going to see inches lost. So your waist is going to get smaller, your belly's smaller, around your back is smaller, your arms are getting smaller, your thighs, it's all getting smaller. But if you lean body mass, bone and muscle weighs a lot more than fat. So you can lose a couple inches, but only lose maybe 10 pounds of weight. And it doesn't seem like that much weight, but you look a lot better because you're so much leaner in your waistline. And that's a much better marker for decreasing your insulin resistance, losing that weight around your belly. So get started on the products, Genesis Gold, and check out my insulin resistant diet, which if you're in the hormone reboot training, you're going to get access to it. And then as you're able to go through those phases. So phase 1 is a little more restrictive. Once you're losing weight consistently, you can add a little bit of high fiber carbohydrates, like whole grains. You add a little bit of that. And if your weight continues to lose, then that means you've actually have conquered some of that insulin resistance, and you're able to stick with that little extra carbohydrate. So it's what I'm saying, it starts off keto, but then it ends up kind of normalizing. If you gain weight immediately, you're not there yet. So you go back to phase 1. So and I explain this in the insulin resistant diet. You go kind of slowly through it, trying to be able to reintroduce that high fiber carb, as soon as you can, so you can start eating normally. And your hypothalamus is now regulated. It may take, if you haven't done hypothalamic support, like I said, 90 days of Genesis Gold before you can actually get off of that insulin resistant diet phase 1 and move into the phase 2 part of it and add some of those carbohydrates. But I want you to be able to eat normally and not, have to watch your diet so restrictively. You can't digest a carb to save your life. Again, if you're having some issues, if you've been on keto for a while, you may have some trouble. You may not be making much amylase, and we don't make cellulase. We're not cows. We're not goats. So you may have to take a little bit of digestive support if you introduce carbs, but start with the insulin resistant diet. There's no carbs in the beginning other than plant foods, vegetables and things like that. And that will actually help to trigger your weight loss and start things going so that your hypothalamus doesn't feel so out of balance by all of a sudden you restricting your calories so drastically. Okay. All right. Any other questions we have? So Gabby's going to put a link in with more information on Genesis Gold. We've got a link in here for information on how to join the Hormone Reboot training, which gives you lots of information, also access. Julia asks that she's starting her 2nd month of Genesis Gold. She noticed that she's supposed to take a larger dose. She didn't calculate according to her body weight. Are you still okay? Yes, you're okay. You can go. A lot of people will start slowly so they don't detox so quickly, but you'll get to your optimal hypothalamic function if you graduate the dose up to your body weight. So it's 4 grams per 50 pounds of body weight. So that scoop that comes in the Genesis Gold is for a 150-pound person. So each third of the scoop is 4 grams. So if you need, if you weigh more than 150, if you're 200 pounds, you're going to need 1 full scoop and a third of a scoop, 1 1/3 scoops. So if you lay a little bit less, you can use a little bit less. But taking it up to your body weight. Now, if you are morbidly obese, meaning you're you're like over 45% body fat, you're very, very obese, you're not going to take a huge amount of Genesis Gold. We're going to get you down to more in the overweight category. Of course, we want you thinner, but get you down into the overweight category. So if you're like 350 to 400 pounds, you're not going to take that much Genesis Gold. Where for your height, overweight would, let's say, would be 250. That is the dose that you're going to take. You're still not at ideal weight, but you don't need to take quite so much. It'll be a little bit too much for your body. Okay. So, but calculate by your weight and then, and see how you do, but going up slowly like you did is fine. It's just fine, Julia. Okay. Any other questions? No? So I'm going to try to meet with you guys at least a couple times a month. So I can answer these questions for you. You can always, if you don't make it to these lives, because it's reposted on YouTube and you can see it whenever, you can always, if you're in the Genesis Health Club, which is part of the subscription, then you can always put your questions. We're going to prime you. We're going to send you an email for you to send the questions to me. So if you can't make it to the live, send me your questions and I will answer it on this live. And then you'll be able to refer back to it, come back to it. Like say this is not a good time for you to watch. You can refer back to it later and I'll make sure that your questions get answered. Okay. So thank you all for joining me. I'm super, super happy. Super happy to be here and to answer your questions. Just ask. I'll do my best to answer them. And like I said, if you send it to me beforehand, if it's something kind of complicated, it just gives me a chance to grab more resources for you. Luckily, I have Gabby, my assistant, online, so I'm not sitting here trying to, go online and find all my references and post them in there. She's doing that. She's listening to what I'm saying and she's posting those references for you so you can find them really easily and you don't have to dig it up. Okay. But if you ask me beforehand, it makes it easier, especially if it's a little more complicated, because I probably have a video or a post related to your particular issue. And so I'll answer your question and then I'll refer you for more information. The more you know, the better you're going to be able to drive this body. It's like we didn't get a manual. I didn't get one. We had to learn as much as possible. The more you know about the body, the better. Thank you, Julia. Hi, Sandra. So Caroline's asking what she needs a little more information about intercourse after menopause. Okay. We're gonna do a special menopause session in June, and we'll talk about all kinds of body parts, but I will key you in, Caroline. One of the issues with menopause is that even if you're on hormone replacement therapy, your vagina sometimes does not get enough estrogen to stay thick and juicy. If you've had a baby, if you've been pregnant before, you know that your vagina becomes very lush. It becomes much more rugated. The tissue becomes thicker, and that's all to prepare to be able to stretch over that baby's head. Okay. When you become menopausal, all that tissue starts to shrink down, becomes very, very dehydrated, very, very thin. So it doesn't have the elasticity, nor does it produce as much lubrication from that tissue. What I have found that works the best. Now, supporting your hypothalamus with Genesis Gold does help. I've had lots of women in perimenopause up through menopause find that that's all they need. Okay. So far for me, that's been working great. But if you're way postmenopausal, you've been postmenopausal for 5-10 years, you may need a little more help. And using estrogen topically in the vagina can actually help to thicken it up. Now, will you have to take it forever? Not at the higher dose you need in the beginning. Think of it like we're trying to plant a lawn, okay? When we first seed that lawn, we're going to overwater it. We're going to water it a couple times a day. So you're going to use a higher dose of the estrogen. I like estriol because that's the pregnancy hormone. It works really fast. But estradiol is fairly effective as well. You can get it in a cream form, particularly made for the vagina. The creams that you put on your skin, the transdermal formulations, are not made to go in the vagina. You want a vaginal cream form. You're going to place it in the vagina. Now, you can use an applicator. I like to use the fingers. The reason I like to use my fingers is, first of all, your receptor sites for estrogen are not that far up, okay? They're only about 2 inches up into the vagina. And a lot of times when you use the applicator, you kind of miss the urethral area, which is if you're not looking at your vagina. But when I'm looking at you and you got your legs in the strip, it's at the 12 o'clock position. So up by your pubic bone, that's where your urethra is. It's up at the top part of your vagina. That becomes very estrogen deficient, and it contributes to having a lot of urinary tract symptoms in menopause and postmenopausally, you want to make sure you go all the way around the clock and not just shove it all the way up there and hope it just kind of drips all the way back down. Rub it in, okay? What you'll notice is when you first start using it, that the inside of your vagina feels very thin and flat, kind of like the inside of your cheek, okay? We want it really kind of wrinkly and thick. Notice that young girls, when they go through puberty, their child lips become lips. They get the nice big fat lips. That's estrogen. Same thing happens to the vulva. Same things happens to the vagina. Okay. So when you lose estrogen, it becomes really thin. Older women, our lips get thinner. Where does our lipstick land? On our teeth, because our lips are so thin. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're thickening up that vagina, and estrogen up about 2 inches up into the vagina all the way around every night. Start with a little higher dose in the beginning. I usually use like 2 milligram dose in the beginning for 4 to 6 weeks. And then I cut the dose in half. So they use half as much. Do that for another few weeks. And then every other night for another few weeks. And then maybe twice a week, once to twice a week for maintenance is all you'll need. Okay. So I'm not a fan of Premarin, Carolyn. The reason I'm not a fan of Premarin is conjugated equine estrogens. So first of all, whenever any animal who makes estrogen urinates it out, that's the toxic estrogen. And so your liver has to take the toxic estrogen from the horse and convert it into estrogen that's more human-like. And some of that estrogen will be converted into carcinogenic types of estrogen. They're called 4-hydroxyl estrogens. Some will be converted into 16-hydroxyl estrogens. Almost none is the good estrogen, 2-hydroxyl estrogen. So conjugated equine estrogens, or Premarin, have not been found to be the safest of hormone replacement therapy. What's better is estradiol, and what's best is to use it transdermally. When you take estrogens orally, and you can only take Premarin orally. It does not come in a transdermal form. When you take, now they do make a Premarin vaginal cream. Again, not my favorite. Estrone doesn't thicken the vagina like estradiol does. Okay. The transdermal form of estrogen is 17-beta estradiol. That's the active form of estrogen. Comes in a patch, comes in gel forms. You can get it compounded by a compounding pharmacist. So there's definitely safer forms and more effective forms for the vagina. Hi, Kim. So Kim is 12 years into menopause, started Genesis Gold at a lower dose because she's so sensitive with hot flashes, night sweats increase. What should you do? Okay, so when you first start balancing your hypothalamus, you can get rebound, and which means you get more hot flashes and night sweats. So what I would suggest is you keep going. I would recommend that you probably go to Sacred 7. It's a little more targeted for night sweats and hot flashes, and then graduate to Genesis Gold. But it is not uncommon to have a rebound effect in the first month of taking it, especially since you've been in menopause for you're postmenopausal, over a decade postmenopausal. So it can kind of wake up your hypothalamus. All of a sudden it's saying, oh my gosh, I have no estrogen in here at all. And you start having hot flashes, it starts responding. The Genesis Gold has the botanicals that open up the receptor site. So it's waking up your hypothalamus. It's in hibernation, kind of gotten used to your no hormone status, your low, almost no hormone status. And now we wake it up. It starts to rebound a little bit, trying to regulate the temperature. It will eventually get better. So you can either go very slowly, adding a microdosing, adding a little bit more and a little bit more. You will stop rebounding, or you back up and you just take the Sacred 7. And that will kind of slow things down because it doesn't open the receptor sites without the botanicals. It's just the amino acids for the hypothalamus to try to optimize it. So that usually will help, but it will stop. It's not going to go on forever. It's not an uncommon effect to have a rebound effect. And like I said, in June, I'm going to be kind of focusing on menopause. Number one, because I'm menopausal and it's one of my favorite subjects. But number two is I get a lot of questions regarding menopause and lifestyle and the hypothalamus and what we can do about staying healthy. What I have found is that my patients who are perimenopausal, menopausal, even postmenopausal, when they're taking Genesis Gold to support their hypothalamus throughout these transitions, even if they do need some hormone replacement therapy, and a lot of them do, they use very little, and they have very little side effects from it because their hypothalamus doesn't need as much to actually start to get back into balance. Okay, I think I got everybody. Any other questions? Oh, Holly, you were clarifying estriol rather than estradiol. Estriol can only be compounded, so that it's my favorite. So I'm putting them in order of my favorite. Estriol is my favorite. It must be prescribed as a compound, okay, by compounding pharmacists. Estradiol is effective. I don't think it's as effective as quickly as estriol, but it can be effective. You can get that in an estradiol vaginal cream through a regular prescription. It does not have to be compounded. So I prefer estriol. Okay. So I think I got everything. Gabby's trying to highlight questions for me, so I know that I've answered everything. I think I got everything. Any other questions, ladies? You're welcome, Holly. It's great to hear from you. I'm glad you guys were able to jump in here, and I hope this YouTube works out for you. Well, I was trying to do Facebook Lives, but then you had to get into the group to get it. So this just allows you all to be able to have access a little bit easier, and it looks like this is working out. Okay, thank you so much, and have a wonderful. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll talk. We can talk about other things if you have questions rather than menopause, but we're going to kind of focus there and try to help people, especially since we'll be entering the summer and it's going to get hot and there are going to be more hot flashes. So I'll give you some tips on how to deal with that. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And all the links for Genesis Gold, Hormone Reboot Training, and where you can get that insulin resistant diet is definitely in this chat. And this chat will stay. Okay, after we end this call. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.